Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. As hours have passed since the DC plane crash, if you want to call it a plane crash or you want to just call it the government using a helicopter to fly it directly into an airplane, because there is no chance whatsoever that a DARPA military helicopter is going to randomly fly and crash into an airplane. There are so many defense mechanisms on these things. They wouldn't get within a certain amount of feet, let alone yards, let alone anywhere near the airspace the way that they were, unless, of course, it was part of a plan. And obviously, there's tons of theories circulating out there about why it happened. I'm sure we'll hear more. I mentioned in my previous video, which is up over on the Nations Conspire channel, which I recommend people subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I talked about how they would start using DEI as a surface level way to draw in the sleeping minds out there, to get them to think that this is something to do with DEI, or it doesn't, that keeps the Republicans and the Democrats fighting. But really, if you pay attention to the narratives, it's all about one thing: building new infrastructure. The fourth industrial revolution, which I can't harp on enough, no pun intended with the word harp, I cannot emphasize enough that everything they're doing is implementing Klaus Schwab's fourth industrial revolution, which is AI governance, which means everything has to run through artificial intelligence. Everything. You're not going to have airports running independently with human beings while all cars and vehicles are autonomous. Everything is going to be run and controlled by it. That's why when you see the picture that the World Economic Forum uses on their website about smart city governance, you see everything connected, which means you have to rebuild and take down and change infrastructure, and you have to get people on board with the changes of infrastructure, which I've talked about in regards to Donald Trump firing federal employees. This is all transitioning over now to AI governance. That's what you're seeing. So people are going to focus in on surface level debates, and they're never going to look at technology as the enemy. They're never going to look at artificial intelligence as the enemy and how they want to implement this, and they have to sabotage the system to get it in place. It's not a sexy narrative. It's not something that people want to hear, because people are attached to their technology anyway. They're attached to these memes, these apps that they use to create memes and GIFs and all this other stuff using AI. They don't want to hear it, but that's the truth of the matter. So now the narrative that's out there is that the Reagan air traffic control tower was understaffed. So now you could start looking at how they're trying to play people, right? Understaffed, Trump firing federal workers or asking them to resign, DEI, incompetent humans. That's where we're headed towards, right? And this is a narrative they've been trying to implement for quite some time. So we have things out there that tell us that this is a false flag op, right? We know that the air traffic controllers asked the commercial plane to change runways, and conveniently it was runway 33, which tells everybody out there who is awake, it should tell you that it's a false flag. They always code their false flags with the number 33. On top of that, you have the design of the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, which obviously has a very visible upside down pentagram. Now, this is something we see all around Washington, D.C. We've seen the obvious things around the White House, where they have the streets of Washington, D.C. from an upside down forming an upside down pentagram, with the White House being at the bottom point of that pentagram. Well, you can see the pentagram in there, which tells you that chances are that this was also a sacrifice. But you can't prove these things when it comes to sacrifice rituals, other than by pointing out the obvious like that, and then talking about the technology they have and how it's almost virtually impossible for a military helicopter, a DARPA Black Hawk, to crash into a commercial airliner. So knowing that it's by design, you have to just start paying attention to what they're feeding you, right? Because remember, the news isn't to inform you, it's to condition you, right? So the narratives that start coming out: did Donald Trump freeze hiring of air traffic controllers? What we know. That's entire articles from Newsweek, USA Today, New York Times, talking about, well, maybe we're not going to say it fully, but Donald Trump has freezed the hiring and he's trying to get federal employees fired. So that were they shorthanded at this specific airport? Here's other things that are out there. Staffing was not normal at Airport Tower, according to a preliminary FFA report. And this is a common theme you're going to see around the United States of America, which is being done by design. Staffing at the air traffic control tower at Ronald Reagan National Airport was, quote, not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic, according to an internal preliminary Federal Aviation Administration safety report about the collision that was reviewed by the New York Times. And again, this comes out how quickly? Within 20 hours of this event actually happening, right? So the controller who was handling helicopters in the airport's vicinity Wednesday night was also instructing planes that were landing and departing from its runways. Those jobs typically are assigned to 2 controllers rather than 1. This increases the workload for the air traffic controller and can complicate the job. One reason is that the controller can use different radio frequencies to communicate with pilots flying planes and pilots flying helicopters. While the controller is communicating with pilots of the helicopter and the jet, the 2 sets of pilots may not be able to hear each other. And I brought up in my previous video, when you start looking at the way stuff is getting worded, right? Autonomy, common theme of the World Economic Forum, common theme of the United Nations, common theme of the New World Order, autonomous systems, artificial intelligence infrastructure. The thing that Donald Trump said from day one he was going to invest heavily in, so much so that we were going to build our own power plants to run these data systems, literally building out Skynet to track and monitor every step that you take. There will be no escape, right? So here's the World Economic Forum talking about how to bring AI into the physical world with autonomous systems. This is what the goal is. This is what the fourth industrial revolution is, right? And again, it's nice to look at all these things and say, yes, there's a pentagram there, and we could say that it's a sacrifice. But if you want to pay attention to what they're really doing, those things that we talk about, there's truth to all of it. We know they commit human sacrifice. We know anytime people die, quote unquote, in the line of fire of a false flag event, that there's a ritual involved. Everybody knows on the 11th day of September that was a massive ritual. We saw it. We didn't just have to guess that it was a ritual. We saw that it was a ritual. How did we say? We saw the aerial shots of the all-seeing eye while the police officers were marching the next morning while smoke was still coming out of the ground. We know the people involved and the rituals that they partake in. So we know those things, right? We saw the Oculus next to where the World Trade Centers once stood. We saw what else? We see those giant 2 holes that they put in the ground. It's signs and symbols all around us, right? That reveal this. But the thing no one pays attention to is infrastructure, because it sounds boring. If someone knocked on your door and said, I want to talk infrastructure, you would say, what does that even mean? Why do you want to talk to me about what? Huh? Who? Where? It's more interesting to talk about what? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because then you could ramble and rant about things that bother you, like your government normalizing insanity and convincing half of our population to be insane and live like insane people and think that they're normal and consider you hateful for questioning what in the world they're actually doing, right? Surface level thinking. So what I want to show you is something that, in addition to autonomous planes, because I talked about those DARPA Black Hawk military helicopters in a separate video. I talked about how those are autonomous. They've been autonomous. They're going to just tell you that somebody was flying the plane. They're never going to admit that this was flown, with no human being inside, because then people would say, well, then I'm never getting in one, right? If a story came out every second of every day about driverless vehicles crashing and killing people, you'd think twice about getting one, right? They like to hide those stories. They like to hide the stories about the EV vehicles blowing up in people's garages. Do they get out sometimes? Yeah. DARPA military helicopters don't fly into commercial airliners every night. It's a very rare thing. In fact, I don't recall a time that this has happened in recent history, especially a military plane crashing into an airliner. We have airliner crashes from time to time where we could speculate, we could see who was on board, right? Doctors who are going to cure this or do that. Well, this situation, we look at it and we can just automatically go, okay, and they're not going to admit to us that these are autonomously flying, because they know that then you'll either say, well, if it's autonomously flying, why was it flying like that? Were you trying to kill the people on the plane? Or the second thing they would think is, I'll never get on one of those. So they can't have you thinking like that. But autonomous flying is one thing. The other thing is these airport towers. These airport towers are going to become obsolete. They keep telling us quietly, if you've been paying attention, they keep telling us that these things are dated, that they're not necessarily safe, that we need to upgrade the system. So what do you think the upgrade's going to be all about? You think they're just going to, get a new modem and stick it in there and a new router? Okay. U.S. air traffic control towers need to be upgraded because they age, become less safe and efficient. The FAA is investigating in upgrades and replacements to improve the safety and efficiency of air travel. Well, they know what the upgrade is. The upgrade is AI. It's just a matter of how do we get you on board with complying to this, which means, one, removing human beings from doing jobs. Well, like the Bible tells us, eventually we're going to live in a world where people, become cold and distant from each other. Well, you're in it right now because people can't even look each other in the eyes anymore. People can't communicate with each other based on their political affiliation or their gender or all these things that they're creating, right? So people care less and less about human beings having jobs. That's for sure. Nobody seemed to care when all of these people lost their jobs a couple years ago because they didn't want to poison themselves willingly, right? Nobody cared. So what makes you think they're going to care now? They're not. They're not. They're going to think more in terms of, well, I don't want some DEI maniac controlling the air traffic control center when I'm on an airplane. That sounds dangerous. I can't take a chance. I fly all the time. I fly from New York to LA. I can't take a chance like that. How am I going to get on a plane and be able to not have a panic attack, knowing that when I land in LA, which is a liberal state, that there might be these blue-haired crazy people who aren't paying attention, who are texting, and my plane might crash, right? Well, here's your solution, right? Air traffic controllers being removed with artificial intelligence. They've been talking about it in the Wall Street Journal, at the World Economic Forum. And this is what it looks like. They'll tell you at first that humans will still be needed. Of course they will. They'll tell you still humans will ultimately be in control until you build your trust in the technology, until you hear stories about how artificial intelligence stopped this plane from crashing and artificial intelligence stopped this car from crashing because it could see ahead of time and save people's lives. That's what they're going to start doing to you, convincing you, hey, you know what? We don't even need the people in the control towers anymore. Don't worry if there's a blackout or anything like that. Well, you won't really have to worry, right? We'll be connected to Starlink anyway because everything's going to be autonomously connected to Starlink, like your tractors, like I covered with John Deere recently. But let me show you what the plan is. And you might look at it and say, well, why would they have to do all this to get to that? Well, there's lots of things that go into how they get you on board with stuff. If we all woke up 10 years ago and they told us that we were going to be living under artificial intelligence surveillance, et cetera, we'd all say absolutely not. So what have they done over the last 10 years? Making crime normal in all cities, showing us people getting pushed in front of trains, in front of cars, making us go, okay, maybe we need CCTV cameras. Maybe we need, these these robot police and everything, RoboCop in the subway. And little by little, they do stuff like this to convince you that it's the right thing to do. And you might say, well, why do they even need to convince us? Well, they need to convince you so there's no revolution that ever actually occurs, that there's no pushback that occurs. Because there is pushback that actually does occur. If people realize what they were doing with AI and this connection between Trump and the World Economic Forum, a lot of people would start pushing back. You did notice a couple years ago when they were trying to stick poison in people, there was a lot of pushback that they did not expect. Because trust me, I've been anti that for a long time. And the movement of being against, getting that shot for the flu and everything else was very small up until that time period. People were going, well, I don't get it anyway. I don't care. Well, until the government was telling you they give you a lap dance and a gift card to Arby's, if you would go and put this inside of you, and doctors forcing people pretty much to get it, or telling you can only keep your job if you get it. So there was pushback. So they're transitioning us into all of this stuff. And I'm not saying that this is the only narrative attached to this. I'm sure there was somebody on that commercial plane that had to go, or maybe there was somebody on the chopper who was tied up in the back. But I guarantee you it was being flown without a human being driving the control of that helicopter, okay? But this is what the world will look like. This is what they're trying to implement. Removal of these towers, everything a surveillance state. Look at the amount of cameras and everything else they want to use to make your life safer, of course, and that's not the truth. It's to make you under full-on surveillance 24/7, everywhere you go, and to get you to comply to it. Look.
The tower at London's Heathrow Airport is hiding a secret. While air traffic controllers at the top of the tower direct planes to take off and land using sight, radar and voice,
658, Mike, good, take off with 3009.
hidden 200 feet down in the base of Heathrow's tower lies the next generation of air traffic control, the digital AI tower. Here, companies are testing whether high-definition cameras and AI algorithms could bring air traffic control into the 21st century. That's because while air traffic has increased fivefold over the past 4 decades, the method for managing air traffic hasn't really changed much at all. So while towers have become an iconic part of any airport, this technology could be their demise. Here's how digital towers are reshaping airports. What you're seeing here isn't a window. It's a live feed from an array of high-definition cameras mounted here, just below Heathrow's tower, which are stitched together to create a panoramic view of the runways.
So the views behind me are the views that the controllers see out of the window, and in fact, to the millisecond are seeing out of the window as we speak now.
The system is being run by NATS, a company that provides air traffic management services to the UK. Andy said that as well as showing the view from the tower, an algorithm is overlaying radar information on each aircraft, making it far easier for a controller to identify which plane is which. And the cameras don't just have to go in a tower configuration. They can be distributed anywhere around the airfield, providing views at ground level during low clouds, or even allowing the air traffic controller to effectively see through buildings.
Controllers can jump electronically 2 or 3 kilometres along the surface of the airport, instantly see objects that are hidden by a terminal building as if they were right beneath the air traffic control tower.
Once you have cameras everywhere, the video can also be sent to machine learning algorithms, like this one being developed by Canadian airport technology firm Searidge. Here, an AI model is using visual processing to identify the support vehicles around the aircraft, like stairs and baggage trolleys, and can instantly determine whether they're in place quickly enough for the plane to make its next departure, something that's currently estimated by ground staff. While turnaround speed may not be a huge deal for passengers, for airlines it's big business. After all, planes that aren't flying don't make money. A Boeing study found that if you take 25 minutes to turn around a 500-mile flight instead of 35 minutes, you could squeeze in almost 200 extra flights in a year. The software is also capable of identifying when an airplane has safely left the runway, even in low visibility, allowing aircraft to continue to take off and land with high frequency in low cloud, and potentially reducing near misses.
An AI will happily monitor a wide range of things simultaneously, whereas a human has to focus on particular areas one at a time. So going from a human scan around an airport to AI being kind of omnipresent in terms of its monitoring, I think is a real bonus, because you then provide the controller with more headspace to do the decision making.
Now, while this technology may seem somewhat futuristic, aspects of it are already in use today. If you've ever landed at London City Airport in the UK, you may have assumed that this traditional control tower-looking building was where the air traffic controllers sit. But they're actually in a digital tower over 70 miles away in this building near Southampton, viewing cameras from atop this tower adjacent to the airport's runway. And in Norway, this digital tower hub, run by airport group Avinor, is being used to provide remote air traffic services to 9 airports across the country, and is set to expand to 21 by the end of the decade, with controllers able to handle traffic at up to 3 airports from the same workstation. Digital towers could also solve one major headache for airports: having to move their towers. See, as air traffic continues to grow and airports expand, existing towers often end up in the wrong place, and moving them isn't exactly cheap. When Heathrow began plans to build a new terminal, over here, the old air traffic control tower, which was previously right in the middle of the airport, was now over a mile away from the new terminal.
The view direct from that air traffic control tower was not sufficient to be able to see Terminal 5, let alone the operations around it.
A decision was made to build a brand new tower in the new middle of the airport, at a cost of £50 million, which, back in the year 2000, was around $80 million. But a digital tower could have removed the need for Heathrow to move its tower at all.
A lot of air traffic control towers are end of life, or airports are expanding, and therefore they need new air traffic control facilities. A digital tower you could do for significantly less than that.
And that's an issue some American airports are facing right now. In a recent report, the FAA identified 31 towers across the US that are functioning beyond their intended design life. So could digital towers be the answer? Well, the US was at one point testing 2 remote towers in Colorado and Virginia, but they've both recently ceased operations, and the FAA has instead launched a pilot program to test virtual tower technology that could be rolled out across America. But for now, while digital towers are going online around the globe, they remain uncertified in America, and it's set to be over 3 years before any remote tower system gets the green light. Which may help explain why the FAA's plan for those 31 sites is to set $500 million aside to aid the construction of new brick-and-mortar towers. So, for now at least, it seems like the iconic air traffic control tower will continue to be a staple for many American airports. But if this technology becomes certified in the US, could it spell the end of the airport tower? Or even the end of the air traffic controller? Well, in Norway, the company running the Digital Tower Centre said that while its remote towers aren't a downsizing process, they acknowledge that not everybody will be able to relocate from far-flung airfields to their remote tower centre. And while AI may be used to provide more and more information to the controller, Searidge say their technology is not a replacement for human control.
We'll have to see as AI capability increases, but there is a real opportunity to support operations now. There is a global shortage of air traffic controllers, so actually being able to be more efficient with our use of that finite resource is quite important.
So that's the future that they have for us, right? Doesn't it look a lot like the pictures you see when you look at the World Economic Forum articles and they show you cities that are all connected, right? Does anyone pay attention to the imagery of it? You look at it, you go, no, yeah, we're interconnected. Wait, what? Everything is connected. So when I talk about infrastructure, it means buildings. It means that small pizza shop owner having a shop, and then Amazon moving in next door and building a shop from the ground up. And Amazon having the entire thing run wirelessly. You can go inside without using a credit card or cash. You can walk in and out of the store like the Amazon Go stores, and you can just pick things up off the shelf and leave. But next door, you got the pizza place, right? And what's his infrastructure? Cash only. Well, that's not going to work, right? So what are you going to do? Go over there and say, hey, we want you to shut down your pizza place because we want everything to be AI. We want everything to run through Wi-Fi and digitally on this entire road. What if he just goes, no, I'm good. I don't care. And they go, hey, we'll give you $10 million. Your pizza place is worth 50 grand. And he goes, I don't want to. It's been in my family forever. I want to keep it, right? Well, then, of course, then they start saying, well, how do we need to tear these buildings down and rebuild them. We need to tear down airports and rebuild them. We need to tear down stadiums and rebuild. Everything has to be rebuilt with this infrastructure embedded in it. It's a control grid where you can't escape or go anywhere, right? So obviously, what do they do to the pizza place? Long story short, well, they burn it to the ground and tell you that it's a wildfire because you wouldn't sell and you wouldn't move, right? These are the things that they're doing, but they're trying to implement AI infrastructure. And it's everywhere, and it's in every business, and it's in every aspect of our lives. From driving cars, not being able to drive anymore on our own, right? How many stories are we going to hear about autonomous driving? How it's safer. How accidents occur less because people are texting and driving, right? And now people can text and drive. They don't have to look up. Oh, that sounds great, right? And then on the airplane, right? You don't want to worry about the air traffic controllers. There are enough workers there. We're firing government workers. Who are we replacing them with? Oh, right. We're replacing them with AI. Well, we're going to need AI towers, right? And then, of course, eventually these planes will obviously be connected completely to the towers through higher levels of 5G to 6G to 7G to 8G. These things will fly autonomously. You'll have zero control, and you will live fully in a control grid. These are the things that they are implementing. We can look at all the false flags. We can look at all the psyops. It's easy to see. You look at the narratives that come out after. What are the narratives that have come out in 24 hours, right? Air traffic control tower was understaffed. It was understaffed because Trump has been firing federal workers. Well, what's the narrative on the other side? Well, it wasn't understaffed. It was incompetency because of DEI hires. And these people continue to fight and not pay attention to what they're actually doing. Problem, reaction, solution. Well, here's the solution. How about we get artificial intelligence? You guys all seem to agree that you love your phones, right? You guys all seem to agree that you love your tech. You love this app, right? Well, true. I do. We love our tech. All right, well, let's bring in our tech, and we could still argue about our differences on certain things, but we'll bring in this infrastructure. It's all run through tech. And then what? We don't have to worry about safety. We don't have to worry about idiots being hired. Nope, don't got to worry about any of it. We created the idiots by design. Don't you see? So we can bring in the AI infrastructure and then, of course, make human beings obsolete. That's the plan. That's what's going on. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.